Hi, I'm... The topic is African World Studies, and we're talking to Drs. Jeffries and Thompson. Dr. Jeffries, before we had our first commercial break, both you and Dr. Thompson gave us excellent information dealing with your background and experience and the organization that the two of you represent. What we'd like to do today is to take advantage of the knowledge that the two of you have and to give you an opportunity to speak to us in reference to some of the critical issues that you believe to be important dealing with the organization that the two of you represent. And so let's start with you, Dr. Jeffries, and of course, Dr. Thompson, you will assist us in developing that idea.
Well, I think initially it's important for us to clarify some definitions of what we mean. When we say African World Studies, it's not something that's outside of us, it's a part of us. We, as people of African descent, realize that whatever we do in America is a part of African World Studies. And so we need to relate it. And we use the term Pan-Africanism, meaning the connectedness between peoples of African background. So we don't want to define African World Studies as some strange thing outside of us. It's a part of us. What we do as Africans in America and African Americans is a part of African World Studies. Our great leaders understood that, and they linked up with the African peoples wherever they found them. So we have, as individual scholars, our own background, but we've bonded together in intellectual and spiritual organizations, and the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization is one. The idea was birthed in 1984, and it was institutionalized in Los Angeles. It was institutionalized in 1985 in Chicago with Dr. Thompson and Dr. Carruthers and others at the Center for Inner City Studies and the Kemetic Institute. And then they had the next major conference in 1986 in New York. And we helped organize that at the City University of New York, where I've been a professor for the last 30 or so years in African World Studies. And as a result of that, we came up with the idea to go on a pilgrimage to study in situ, to study in Africa itself. So we went to the Nile Valley, to Kemet. Almost 1,000 of us, men, women, and children, 3 generations went with me. My mother went, my nephews went, my godchildren went, my wife and I. Dr. Rousing Jeffries was there as leaders of the organization. So that's what I'm saying, that the African World Studies, after the 1,000 came back, they went back to their teachings, to their preaching, to being engineers, to be bankers, and they brought this knowledge of who we are as African peoples back home to our communities. We need to understand that Africa is at the center of the world experience. It's in Africa that the human family was born. It's in Africa that the first civilizations and cultures rose. And so we need to understand how important this knowledge is. It was, at one time, believed that Africa was not a main part of human civilization, that Africans contributed nothing to civilization. We come to find out that the historical fact, the scientific facts are that Africa is the birthplace of the human family, and it's out of Africa that the first main flow of culture and civilization took place. The first writing systems, the first mathematics, the first cultural development, the first moral systems come out of African peoples. African World Studies helps us to systematize that process and put it in the classrooms and put it in our homes and put it in our institutions.
Very good. You know, Dr. Thompson, within that context, if you had to identify what your organization considered to be one of the major issues that you have to promote now at this particular time, outside of the fact that you have to tell more people about Africa, what would be the major issue that would center around this organization?
Well, for us, the major issue for us is to study what happened actually in the past. We call it historical memory. And if we go back as far as possible to the beginnings, most of the so-called ideas of civilization would start somewhere around rivers. The Nile River, the Indus, the Niger, the Limpopo, the Congo River. And so we've spent a considerable amount of time learning about Africa. And in so doing, we have found that as Europe seems to want to give us Greece as the center of the world and the giver of civilization, it seems to be just the opposite. Although for the European world, they see Greece as the center of everything. But now we find the Nile Valley to be the center. So we concentrate on learning the language, the ancient languages of the Nile, which some people call the hieroglyphs, we call it Medu Neter. In addition to studying those languages, we study the ancient histories before the coming of all other groups that tend to call themselves the founders of civilization. In addition to that, we've formed a structure as a result of what Dr. Jeffries just said. We now have a national organization that meets every year, every 4th or 5th year. We go overseas to have our conference. In addition to that, we have 5 regions. We have a Western region, a Midwestern region, a Southern region, an Eastern region, a Mid-Atlantic region. We have 4 commissions, one commission that deals with education, another one that deals with research, one that deals with the creative productions, and what's the other one I left out? So whatever we have 4. And in addition to all of those things, we are research driven. We want to bring the history of African people down to our people, wherever we find our people. And as a result of that, then we'll understand who we are and why we are here and what our destinies will call for.
Now, what has been, Dr. Jeffries, I'm not sure about how much time we have here before the end of this segment, but what would you suggest to the individuals today to become more involved in what the two of you are doing? Because it's certainly a great scholarly activity and et cetera, but how do you get people involved in what the two of you are doing today?
Well, in order for people to have their full consciousness and their true development, they've got to study. And so I tell everybody I meet to study, to study, to study. And as a professor myself, I'm continuing to study. My wife and I both are seriously looking at and re-evaluating this whole flow of knowledge. We have to really thank those at Tennessee State University who allowed us to join them and to host this enormous activity. We have to control the development of our mind, and we cannot have this negative projection of our development imposed upon our people. If you do not have self-respect and self-understanding, you can't have true development. Whoever controls the images, remember this, whoever controls the images controls the self-esteem, the self-respect, and the self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. And so for people who did not appreciate African peoples and peoples of African descent everywhere and said we participated in no historical development of significance, now we know the truth. And that truth has been revealed by the truth, that we are the foundations of the human family. We don't take a back seat to any other group, and that becomes important. That allows us to develop a sense of vision and purpose and direction so that we can move our people in the correct direction.
And of course, Dr. Jeffries and Dr. Thompson, we're getting ready for our second commercial break. But when we come back, let's see if we can have the two of you perhaps suggest how we might be able to incorporate some of the information that we're talking about now into the public school systems. Because I know, and as the two of you undoubtedly know, that even in higher education, you don't find that much information relative to what you're talking about. But how do you get it down to a lower level? And we'll talk about that when we return. We'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.
Something that used to...
Talking to Drs. Jeffries